Lovely to see you all today. How is everyone? Good? Excellent. It's good to hear. Thank you, Noah, and the worship team for sharing today with your talents and your gifts. We are very blessed here at Rosny to have the people that we have to lead us into worship. And sometimes we get a bit complacent with that. We forget how lucky we are. Because we've had a couple of people here about 3 weeks ago, they were visiting with us. And I was talking about in the foyer after church, and they just loved our worship service, just could not believe the talent that we had up the front. And I said, that's just a small part of it. I said, there's more that get up there, it's not just those people. So to all those who participate in making church what it is, I want to thank you today. Who loves stories? Most people? That's good. We all have at some time seen something happen, maybe in our own lives or in the lives of others, that has inspired us. It has built up our faith and our trust in God. Or we have seen others' faith and trust in God shattered by experiences in their own lives or the lives of others. The stories of others can be very powerful and are an avenue of learning about the Christian experience and about how God can work in and through us. We can learn to trust in God, to put our faith in God, and to have a better relationship with Jesus through the telling of stories. This is probably one of the best ways that I personally learn about Jesus and what he can do for me. And I love that. You can't beat a good story. Have you ever noticed that Jesus told lots of stories in the New Testament to teach people the way to be in a better relationship with him and with each other? Stories about people and how God has led in their lives is also a great way to get to know that person better. In our church community, there are lots of stories that we have heard about that we can give thanks to God for, that we can praise God for, and can remind us of how God has worked in our life also. They can be joyful, they can be emotional, both happy and sad, and they can be funny also. But at the end of the day, our story is about giving glory to God, and through the way he has worked in our lives, even when we have been a long way from him or life has not gone the way that we had planned. Today we are going to have 2 testimonies from our church family. They both will be different, just as all of us are different. But there will be one common thread. The same God who died on the cross and rose again to give us all life, and gave us life now and forever, hasn't stopped working in people's lives. It's that same God. And he wants to continue that same work in and through us all. It is this God we will be glorifying today. May you be blessed as we listen and learn more about our church family, and more importantly, about God has been and continues to be in their lives.
Well, I'm not going to preach, but I'll tell you some of my story. Now, when you look back in life and you reflect, you can see how God has led, how he has protected you, and also how he has used other people to have an influence on your spiritual life. So I'll start with myself as a baby. Now, you might think some of it's my mother's story, which is quite true because I was only very little for a lot of the time. But, you know, we were a team. I was always there also. So I was born in Berlin, Germany in January 1939. I was the first and only child of my parents, and they called me Irene. Now, my parents were not churchgoers, but of course it was tradition to have your baby christened or baptized. And when I was 8 months old, that's what they did. They took me to a little evangelical church near where we lived, and I was baptized. My parents were quite impressed by the preacher that day. The words he spoke really resonated in their life. So I became a little Lutheran. Now then, tragedy struck. Just a few weeks after that, my father got very ill with severe abdominal pain, and by the time that the diagnosis was correct and they operated, the appendix had burst. So there are no antibiotics at that time. And so a few days later, my father passed away. He was 31, Mum had just turned 28, and it's a real tragedy, and I don't know how my mother coped. Although when we're talking about it later, she said, look, she said, all the time I had the feeling that someone was hugging me, embracing me. So that must have been God at that time, although she didn't know it. Now, a couple of years later, Mum had to go back to work. So we moved close to where my grandmother's house was, and so she could look after me while Mum was at work. So I must have been 3 at the time, because I can remember little things now that happened, where our flat was, and remembering sitting on the back of Mum's bike when she brought me to Oma and also took me back home in the evening. But Mum worked in a government department, and while there, she became friends with another young woman called Lisbeth. Now, Lisbeth was a Christian, and bit by bit, she introduced Mum to God, to Jesus, and the Bible. And Mum was converted, gave her heart to the Lord, and they went to church in the city mission in Berlin, run by the Methodists, so we became Methodists. Now the bombing increased. We had air raids all the time, so the department moved to a town north of Berlin where they thought it might be a bit safer and not so much bombing, but they were wrong. Anyway, Lisbeth and Mum and I moved to the town, and now Lisbeth and Mum went to work and I went to kindergarten. Now that's a child-minding centre. And until I slipped on an icy footpath, came down very awkwardly on my leg and broke. So Oma came up to join us and to look after me. Now, towards the end of the war, the Allied armies were getting close to Berlin, and so we had to leave where we were and tried to make our way back home. Well, we got part of the way. We couldn't get right into Berlin, but Lisbeth's mother-in-law had like a shack in a little compound where there are some other shacks as well. So we moved in. We weren't the only ones who moved in. Part of the Russian army moved in as well. So all around us were trucks and soldiers, and we couldn't really feel safe. Now, old ladies and children were quite safe with the Russians, but young women were not. And so Mum and Lisbeth wore clothes like grandmother's clothes, very drab and with aprons and a headscarf. They made themselves look old and unattractive to be safe. So We lived there a bit in fear, but also, well, what could you do? One day a Russian soldier came with a button in his hand. He came to my grandmother and wanted, very dry, thank you. He wanted her to put this button back on the shirt sleeve which he was wearing. And so trembling, my grandmother put the button back on his shirt, and then he asked for a knife and a cup and me to come with him. Well, that was all right. I went with him, and he hopped onto the back of the truck with the knife and the cup, but I stayed outside. Thank you. Thank you. And he came out of the truck with a big slab of bread that he had cut off his own bread, and he filled the cup with lard and gave it back to me to take it back home. Now, it was a very appreciated gift at that time because we didn't have a lot of food, or very little food. Now, a few days later, the Russian soldiers were giving heaps and heaps of vodka. They were getting ready to move on to Berlin the next day. So there we were with all these Russians around, very drunk, and so we stayed in our house. Now something happened in the afternoon. A Russian officer, he was a stranger. He came into the house we were in and just sat down. He didn't say anything then, he just sat. Now the afternoon turned into evening, evening turned into bedtime, and he was still sitting there. So no one knew really what to do about it. But then he said, "Look, I'm going to stay here, because while I'm here, you will be safe." So who was this man? Was he really a Russian officer, or had God sent an angel to look after us that day, because it was very dangerous. Now, the next morning, as we all got up, I don't think we had slept much, but the officer was gone, and so had the whole Russian army. They were on their way to Berlin. Now, we stayed a little longer, and when we were able, we too wanted to make our way back home. So all our belongings were put on a little wooden cart that could be pulled along, and because I was only 6 years old, I was allowed to sit on top of the luggage and was pulled along, and that day we got home. Now, we didn't know what condition our house would be, but everything was safe. The house wasn't damaged at all. Mum's brother and his wife and my two cousins, they already lived downstairs, and Mum and Oma and I, we moved upstairs. Then Germany was sort of cut into sections, zones, etc. And it happened that our house was just on the outskirts of Berlin, so we were then in the Russian zone, but within walking distance of West Berlin. And living under the Russians was hard. There was not much food, or hardly any food. We couldn't get any heating to heat the house in a very cold winter, but we survived. And then Mum got a job. She and my auntie heard that the Americans were looking for cleaners. They had occupied some of the buildings in West Berlin, and wanted cleaners to do some cleaning up. Now, Auntie and Mum went there with buckets and mops, thinking they would be cleaning out, buildings. But while they were waiting, an American officer, actually he was an Austrian Jew, so he could speak, fluent German. He came, saw all the ladies, and there, is anyone here who can type? So Mum put her hand up, and straight away he took her to where they'd started an office, and they employed her straight away, and she worked there. This would have been in 1946. She worked there until we came to Australia in 1953. I went to school, my cousins and we started school, first in the east and then also in West Berlin. Now the borders at that time, they called them the green border. I mean, there were checkpoints where east went to west, but you could go wherever you wanted. There are just some rules. You weren't allowed to bring anything in or anything out. And when we had things to bring in, like some butter or things like that we couldn't get in the east, we brought it in our school bags. They didn't check those, whereas adults were, too scared to bring things in. Now, Mum had her job. We also had our garden with fruit trees. In the summer, we could plant things. And on the whole, we were in a good place for the next few years when the borders were open. Mum was earning West money, which means the good money. And, we were all right. Life was pretty good. But then in 1952, the Russians decided to close the border between the Russian zone and West Berlin. Now, we were living there, but Mum worked with the Americans. I went to school in West Berlin, so closing the border meant we wouldn't have been able to get out again because, we still lived in the family home in the Russian zone. So we got out with a couple of suitcases and went first to Lisbeth's place where she lived with her mother, and then Mum got somewhere for us to live just opposite her work in West Berlin. It was only a bed-sitting room, sharing it with the owners of the flat. But when we first, I missed out a bit. When we first came back to our house, when we started school, we also started to go to the Methodist Church in West Berlin. We had to take a couple of trains to go there, but we did that. And there we also, because we didn't have much to eat in the Russian zone, they gave us care packages from America. And then we also got parcels from Australia. Now, I'll have to fill you in how that happened. Now, in the 1800s, my great-grandfather's brother came to Tasmania as a migrant with wife and 2 children, and they settled in Tasmania. They also started sending letters back home, first in German and later on in English, and then the family here sent letters back to them. So that went on for many, many years. And it was now, the 1940s, 46 or 47, when we got the parcels. Now, when the English letters came from here, Mum had learned English at high school, and she was able to translate the letters each way. And so, still at that time, from the 1800s to at that time, the families were still in touch from Tasmania. They had settled in Longley, and even today, now the surname was Knoop, K-N-O-P, Nop. Mum was Knoop, Nop. And there's still a street in Longley that is Nop's Road. But as well as food parcels, they sent something else even more valuable. They sent a landing permit to come to Australia for the whole family. Well, we couldn't go straight away. My grandmother was not well, and we wouldn't have gone while she was alive. Then after we, in West Berlin, living there in the bedsit, Mum had a good job, I was at high school. Life was pretty good, but we didn't have family, and we couldn't go back. Mum couldn't even get permission to see her mother when she was dying. And so why not go to Australia? Why not, just for a couple of years to see what it's like. So tickets were bought to go on the ship from Genoa to Melbourne, and 4 weeks on the boat, and it was really nice. When we got to Melbourne, we could look down from the ship and see downstairs all the people who were waiting for their families who were on the ship. And I heard this lady, "Irene! Irene!" I didn't take any notice that she's not calling me. I had never heard my name pronounced in English. But then, realised, and Auntie Deaf and Uncle Jack took us to their home in Melbourne. And a few days later on the Taruna, a ship that came from Melbourne to Tasmania, through Bass Strait. Boy, was I seasick. I'd been on this other big ship, no seasickness, but coming on the Taruna through Bass Strait, yes, I did. I wasn't well at all. Mum was fine. I think she had a different stomach to mine. So we came to Hobart by train from Burnie, and Auntie Sis and Uncle Lou picked us up and took us to their home in Grove. Now, the people who did the correspondence from here towards the end were 3 Stellmaker sisters. And so Auntie Sis was one of them, and we went to the Grove. Later on, we also met Aunt Lizzie, who was from the Knopp family, and they're all wonderful. They looked after us so well, they helped us, they were generous, and we couldn't have asked for more. Now, I left in grade 9. I was 14 and turned 15 just before we got to Hobart, and really, I should have gone back to school, but it's a big thing to come to a country where you where you know hardly anybody. The school was just too scary for me to go back to school. Do you believe it or not, but I was very shy at that time. So one of Aunt Lizzie's granddaughter knew insurance company manager and talked to him, and I started there as an office junior. I was happy about that. Now, Mum had to go job hunting as well. But that's not easy when you come from another country, and She stayed at Aunt Lizzie's in Warwick Street, and she could walk in the town from there. And she came across a place called Business Equipment. She went in there with her papers and, she said, "Are you from Germany?" That's lovely. That's not what many people said when we first got here. But they said, we bought this Mercedes accounting machine, and all the manuals that came with are in German. So, now how lucky can you get? How did God work in all those situations? So she helped them translate the manuals. They taught her how to use it. And then when this machine went to Simmons Wolfhagen solicitors, Mum was the extra person that came with the machine. And she worked there on this machine until she retired at the age of 60. Now another person, I was going to say, when we stayed at the Grove with Auntie Sis, we went to the, what church? In the Huon. Glen Huon Church, I couldn't think there. Usually afterwards we had lunch with some of the church members. Now, two of the family were the Browns, which is, I've lost it. Pardon? Bronwyn's parents are with the Buxtons. Mm-hmm. Now, Auntie Lizzie and her family, they were Methodists. And seeing we were still Methodists at that time, we went there quite often. But at Simmons Wolfhagen, there's a lovely lady, young lady working there. Her name was Carmen Stevens, Philip's mum. And so when the Adventists held evangelistic series in the town hall, Carmen invited us. And we went to every session and just drank it in. Now, we were Christians before, but there was so much extra, apart from, in the Adventist message that grabbed us. And when the time came to ask people to come forward for baptism, I was the first one to go. Later on, we were both baptised, Adventists, and I am still here.
Good morning. This is the part where I stand up here and tell you all how nervous I am. Well, I'm not. I'm going to suggest that there are more of you out there that are nervous about the fact that someone's given me a microphone and an audience up here than what I actually feel at the moment. And if you want to blame anyone for that, that's Tony's fault. He invited me today to pass my story on, and I said, great, give me a mic. I've always thought about doing a testimony, and I always thought the platform might be with XT Church, probably with no cameras and a smaller, intimate group. And maybe one day I might tell a longer testimony than I've got today, because you said I've only got 50 minutes. 15 minutes. Oh, sorry. So if you want to hear a longer version, that may come out in XT one day. But when Tony asked me, I don't think there was a hesitation, was there? I said yes. And I feel that was because I wanted to speak with you guys and also you YouTubers out there. This message is coming for you too. I'm watching you guys on your couch out there, so I've got things to say to you as well today. Look, I want to acknowledge the worship team again. As I'm quite often a part of the worship team, I feel that's a very important part of the church, and it's a mission I like to be a part of, and they did a wonderful job again today. I'd also like to thank Tony for shaking his nerves and getting up here and speaking again, and Rosie. To be honest, you've put me right off my whole sermon. I'm just still trying to comprehend how many kidneys you've got going on in there. That's like the weirdest kid story I've ever heard. I've heard a lot from Theo, so that's a pretty wild kid story. But thank you, Irene, too. And when I said I was going to let you go first, I had no idea that I was going to have to follow up on a story like that. That's really not fair. There's no way that I can compete with a story. What a story, everyone! Hey, I had a great opportunity to speak with Irene in Connect Sabbath School. It was last week, wasn't it? We partnered up and did a little one-on-one, and Irene also told me another little snippet of her life. It was after that, and don't worry, I'm not going to spread that today. But the things we don't know about our church congregation. I've been coming to Rosny for 50 years. Again, you 50? Yeah, that's right. The whole time. And if someone was to stop and say, "Do you know Irene Woolley?" I'd say, "Yes, I do. I know Irene Woolley." But do I know Irene Woolley? 50 years, and I know very little about Irene Woolley. And to me, that rings alarm bells, that I've been turning up to a place week after week. You know, we have periods where we're not here or whatever, but predominantly week after week. And I know very little about Irene Woolley, and there's more to Irene Woolley than what you just heard and what I heard last week, and I plan on digging more of that out too, Irene. I'd love nothing better than to sit down and have a chat with you and dig some more of that out, and I encourage you guys to do the same. We had Kendall down here, didn't we, a few weeks ago, and he's encouraged us to as a congregation, as a family, to get together and to talk to fellow parishioners in your congregation here. We've all got stories. Look, some of us aren't as willing to let go of them. Some of them you mightn't be able to shut up once you ask them a question. But there are so many stories out here, and it gives us an interesting background on why people are the way they are, why they come to do what they do, why they shoot out of church straight away as soon as it's finished, or why they do things. And we often judge that on face value. And I think for us to sit down, and it's up to us, I think, to get while we do these testimonials, it's up to us to sit down and get each person's testimonial out of them. We have plenty of church lunches. We talk for 30 or 40 minutes at the end of the service. Deep dive into some of your mates, so that when someone says, "Oh, you know, do you know Theo? Do you know Ross? Do you know Dwayne?" and you can go, "Yeah," but do you really know them? Do you really understand the person that they're asking about? And I just realised I've just started spieling off, and I'm not even looking at any of my notes. So I better stick to the script, or we will be here for 50 minutes. I'd just quickly like to pray for myself, if I can be indulgent there, if you wouldn't mind bowing your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, please be with me today as I relay some of the thoughts that you and I have had this week in planning this sermon, and may my story and the things that I have to say be things that you have to say to your family here, and please bless the words I'm about to use. Keep my head clear, and let me portray your words through to your loving family here. Amen. Back to the script. I was baptised on a very busy baptism day. I think there was about 6 would be correct, I think, on my baptism. And with a baptism, you know, we quite often now give a little bit of a mini testimony or a bit of a story before we go in. But it was literally, as Mark Falconer would probably say, a sheep dunking session. I think a sheep dipping session. We were in and out of there faster than we had really a time to give a good story for. So a lot of people don't sort of really know the story I've got through coming up to my baptism, but I've got a reasonable story. A lot of it not appropriate probably to tell in church. A lot of it I could probably tell some kids' stories, but probably not, which means they may be worse than a lot of what Theo did as a kid growing up. But there you go. A lot of what people understand about me, we'll just put down as myth too. But what I'm about to tell you today is 100% true, and we'll get on with that. So my story starts with, I guess, me growing up as a youngster. Both my parents grew up in Sevi families, Seventh-day Adventist families, and therefore I was brought up with a Christian upbringing. Dad tended to... Dad tended to work a lot. He was a busy man. He worked probably, 6 days, sometimes even 7 days a week. He did what he thought he needed to do for the family, and worked and earned a lot of money to put us through good Christian school upbringing and that sort of thing. But Dad was, let's just say, not overly close to Christianity in his later years. That'd be a polite way of saying that. Mum remained true to her upbringing and faith. Now, I have very early memories of family worship in our house. It pretty much consisted of us having a morning prayer before we went off to school. It was at that age, it was a little bit, and maybe with a lot of young folks' prayers, it was a little bit pre-prepped and methodical, and sometimes a little bit the same prayer over and over again. I remember, and I'm looking at Janelle here, I remember praying for Dad, for God to give him travelling mercies. Yeah, okay. When I'm 5, what the dickens is travelling mercies? I don't know, but I was told that I should pray for God to give Dad travelling mercies. Obviously, older now, I realise that to keep him safe on the road. But these were the things, and every morning I would pray for travelling mercies. So Mum did a try with our family worship, but that was probably nearly the extent of it, or the extent of what I remember of it at that age anyway. Mum then often started working weekends as well. Mum worked in looking after old people in retirement homes and stuff, and quite often had a lot of shift work on Saturdays. But she always organised for us to go to church. This is where I need to give credit to Eddie's not here today, but Jarrod, full credit to the Lees, who I think, and I can talk for Janelle too, will always be thankful for the work you put in getting us to church nearly every weekend, and the work you put in with us with Pathfinders and that, and we grew up nearly sort of like cousins, probably to your children too, I'd say, Jolene, and we forged a close bond there. So between Mum and the Lees, we always managed to get to church each week, and obviously come to Sabbath school and learn everything from growing up. So I've been coming to Rosny my whole life. Is this good? Is that good? Is that a good thing? It is obviously, but growing up, learning the kindy stories, learning the Sabbath school stories, I did all that, learnt all the memory verses, and recall all of that, but I wasn't doing any deep diving or anything into the Bible at that stage. It was still probably a little bit methodical. And to be honest, with the little home worship that we did do, my entire understanding of the Bible up until only and this is embarrassing a bit, but until only a few years ago, pretty much is a recollection of stories from kindy and Sabbath school and so forth. So to this day, I do feel a little bit behind the eight ball a bit versus someone who has had a light bulb moment or a bringing to church, who is yearning and thirsting for information, which I've already had a taste of my whole life. So I feel that sometimes growing up in the church, it can leave us a little bit behind, whereas someone who's, like I said, had that light bulb moment is sort of willing to really deep dive in and thirst for information. As a teenager, I remember having a few Bible studies with Graham. Graham came and gave Bible studies with us, and again with the Lees. I'm going to say at that point in time in my life, I didn't absorb them. I apologise greatly, Graham. I do apologise greatly, and I'll come and give you a hug later, but because I feel bad. And it was nothing against Graham's Bible studies. It was nothing against the people I was doing them with. But at that age, I found that stopping and going to a Bible study was just an interruption to what teenage boys wanted to do. And because I was turning up to them with that attitude, I don't feel I was absorbing them. If you've got notes of them, Graham, I'll gladly run through them again, but I do apologise for that. But that's just what I'm saying. So growing up, I still really just had a sort of a storybook idea on Christianity. A few years later than that, we were very, very blessed to be part of an awesome youth group at Rosny at that point in time. We had Rob Fraser here leading that up, and we were a strong group. There would have been a dozen or more, probably getting around in that youth group, and it was a really strong time. We were doing some strong Bible studies. We were also importantly doing some strong socialising, and we were a strong group outside of church hours as well. We'd be out on Saturday nights hanging with each other or playing golf or doing other things on Sundays, and we were a really connected a group of young Adventists at that time. Now, I'm going to say something here to young adults. So I'm staring down your barrel now, yes, and all young adults, all young YouTubers out in YouTube land. If you've been to church and you've grown up in church and you've gotten to that stage nearly where I was at there, where I wasn't keen, I wasn't accepting Bible studies, you start going to work with different people, you associate with different workmates that don't necessarily have the same ideas and principles as you, and you can find yourself drifting. But what I'm going to say to any young adults in the church listening, if you do drift, and it can easily happen if you do drift away and you find yourself not coming to church, you find yourself out working 7 days a week or hanging out with other people, instead of turning up to church, always keep in touch with the people that you went to church with your peers from church. If it be in 20 years or 30 years' time you find you still haven't been coming back to church for whatever reasons, don't ever reject the people that you used to hang with from church, even if you are veering away from that. That's very important, because you may always need a lifeboat or a rope to grab hold of, and someone to connect you back with the church. So always stay in touch with people. And likewise, people in the church, try to keep in touch with any young folk that have disappeared from the church. Send them a text, send them a Facebook message, whatever, and even if it's just a hello, how you doing, haven't seen you for a while or whatever. And, they may not come back to church, but keep doing it, keep in touch with the young folk. and keep a connection open. I know the XT group have got their mentors, their adult mentors. Keep in touch with those adult mentors. Never ever forget them, and never ever be frightened or afraid to get in touch with them. You can never veer too far away from church that you can't call one of your mentors or one of your previous peers and have a chat with them. I got to an age where I started dating. Well, that's embarrassing. We're talking about that today. We're going to talk about that? Yeah, okay. I started dating and eventually moved in with my first partner. We would still visit church occasionally, but it was nearly more of a lackadaisy Catholic relationship where we'd turn up for Christmas and Easter and maybe one or two in between. So it was definitely infrequent there for a few years. And that definitely wasn't doing my Christian journey any favours either. I would say I was very, very, very rarely praying or reading scripture or anything throughout these years. This partner I speak of had a sort of rough Christian upbringing, but we definitely weren't vibrant or alive in any kind of relationship with God at that stage. We were together for 6+ years, and then due to what I'm going to describe as probably nearly family pressure, just to get me off the hook, but due to family pressure, what we felt was family pressure, we got married. Wasn't a good idea as it turned out. We'd been together for 6 years, got married, and we were divorced after 18 months after that. So at that time, I didn't understand what had gone wrong. I didn't know whether it was because we'd gotten married. Was it something I'd done, something she'd done? Look, upon reflection now, I take my portion of the blame fairly and squarely, looking back at it now, and I hold no malice. I try to look back at myself and deduce my failures in what is always a two-way relationship. Sometimes we can look outside a relationship and go, yeah, that was his fault, or yeah, that was her fault. But at the end of the day, it's two people working on that, and I have to stick my hand up and say, well, I definitely had my problems and my failures in that relationship. This was a disturbing time, being a young fella and having a marriage breakup, especially when we were still sort of slightly in touch with the church. That's a large group of people to admit that you've had a fairly major failure too. I felt embarrassed. I felt like a huge failure. It was a really hard time. I remember one morning, at this point in time, I lived about 35 minutes away from work, I suppose. I remember hopping in my car one morning. This was when I was living in my house by myself still at that point in time, driving to work, crying the whole way to church. 35 minutes, a grown man driving all the way to work, crying. And then trying to back that up with turning up to work, putting on a brave face, doing a day's work, and then going back home to an empty house, and it was literally nearly an empty house, to finish packing up and splitting up all the stuff at home that we were dividing up between us. At this point in life, all you're thinking about is your pain and embarrassment due to it being a major failure in life. And you think, how am I going to climb out of this? And, time heals all wounds. But at that point in time, when you're at rock bottom, you're just thinking, oh, how much time is this going to take? It's you're just absolutely rock bottom, and you can't see your way out. I still at that point in time, I probably did fire a few prayers away, I would say, at that point in time. But they would be typical prayers for many people that turn to God at that point in time where they're in trouble, you know. You know, people get to a bad point and they, you know, they feel they've got nowhere to turn, and what do? They turn to God. And I'll admit I probably fired a couple of prayers away in that scenario. A little while later, after that, I got to know Narelle. We dated and married, which is going to creep Ollie out wherever Ollie is, but we won't go into that too much. Dated and married. We've been together for 23 years now, if you include our married time and our dating time. And I have a beautiful 14-year-old... A beautiful? Oh, no, I've got a 14-year-old son. And when you look at where I am now versus where I was 2 or 3 points ago on this script, complete opposite of my crying spectrum. It has taken a long time. It has taken a long, long time. And, you know, our journey with God, it takes a long time. When it's easy for me to say as a 50-year-old up here looking back, you can see where your path travels and where we've been heading. But at those times where you're rock bottom, you're just thinking, oh, how long is this going to take to get out of this space? I still make plenty of mistakes as a husband. Oh, did you write that bit? I still make plenty of mistakes as a husband that worry me. Obviously, from coming from a failed relationship and a divorce, I always fear that I could be repeating or doing whatever I was doing wrong, you know, as my part of the failure of that relationship. But one thing I did learn from the failure of my first relationship, and I think this was a very large part of it, I do not take Narelle for granted. I think with my first marriage, we got married, we did our own things, and we sort of took each other for granted, but I never ever take Narelle for granted now, and love her very much and appreciate everything she does for me. That's one heavy spot in my life. This next bit I'm not going to be real comfortable with because I don't normally like discussing my health on a grand scale such as this. I'm happy to talk one-on-one with anyone. Anyone can ask me any questions they like and I'll give you an answer. I'll probably give you more answers than you'd be comfortable with if you ask me questions, but I'll talk to anyone one-on-one, but this is uncomfortable for me. I'm not one to stand up here and discuss my health problems, as I feel like I'm amassing sympathy in large doses, and I'm not that kind of not that kind of person. But it's hey, this is a testimony. I couldn't skip over this next bit. You'd all be going, hang on, he missed the main part of his testimony out. A few months into our marriage, what was it, about 3 months, was it? A few weeks into our marriage, we found I had some, well, we thought it was swelling, didn't we, in one side of my neck there. So we went off to the GP and he's going, yeah, you've got some swelling in your neck. We probably should give you some antibiotics for that to get the swelling down. Okay, we didn't think too much of it, but so we took some antibiotics, and lo and behold, they didn't do anything with the swelling in my neck. So the GP said, oh well, we probably should go off and have some scans done, take some photos of it, and see what's going on. So we went off and started a journey of internal body photography that's been going on for quite a while. But they found some lumps in my neck, which and I won't go right into it, but it turned out it was a bit of a genetic thing. My father had some lumps in his neck. He'd had them removed, and he managed to carry on okay without too much trouble. But once the GP got the message back about lumps in the neck, he had to give us all the information, didn't he, wife? He had to prepare us for everything, and he said, well, you better sit down and get ready because it looks like it could be some form of cancer. I think at that stage he thought lymphatic cancer, which was great because we were having about 6 or 8 people around for a barbecue that night, weren't we? And I remember driving my poor old GP. My poor old GP, and some of you will know who my GP is, my poor old GP, occasionally Narelle still comes with me to a GP visit and he still apologises for making her cry that day. It was an emotional moment, and poor old wife, was quite upset at the prospect of we'd just been married and we were getting sort of getting results like that back from the doctors. Anyway, it took weeks and weeks of specialist appointments. Then it took a surgery organised in Melbourne. I had to go over to Melbourne because it was too complex a surgery to have here in Hobart, and they needed quite a team of people to carry it out. So we went over to Melbourne and they wheeled me off in a trolley. I kissed my wife and she said she'd see me when I came back out. All day my wife waited. It was meant to be, a 3 or 4 hour, maybe... Yeah, it was meant to be a few hour surgery. I was fine because I was knocked out and I didn't know how long it was. I was there all day. It sort of wasn't worrying me, but poor old wife had to wait in the waiting room all day. Luckily, she'd, and some of the medical people in here are going to have a pink fit, she'd been Dr. Googling my surgery and had discovered that if it didn't go quite to plan, that they had to do a whole lot of additional work, which it turns out they had to do with me. And so I ended up being in there all day, which I can only imagine what went through your mind, wife, as that was going on. Here comes an interruption to my testimony. When you are praying for people who aren't well, especially those that have a chronic illness or a terminal illness, pray for their partners. Pray for their families, but pray for their partners. We go to... As the patient, we go to the doctor and we've got a fairly good idea on how we're feeling, how sore we are, how sick we are, how we're going to cope with it. We're trying to keep our mental plan moving forward. But the poor partners sit there and all they can do is sit there and pray and hope and cross your fingers that it's going to go well. And the feeling of hopelessness and the look of hopelessness on your partner's face is terrible. So just remember, when you are praying for ill people, pray for their poor old partners who are going through that and feeling helpless at the same time. Anyway, we went to... had the surgery finished and they did a sample biopsy, found out that it was malignant, which wasn't really part of the plan because, as I mentioned earlier, my father had had some of these lumps. He had them out and he was fine. After finding out it was malignant, I'll be honest, for me, the whole ordeal felt fairly surreal. I can remember sitting in waiting rooms at the Peter Mac Clinic, sitting in waiting rooms at the Royal Hobart in the cancer ward there, and looking at posters on the windows and the walls saying, if you've got cancer, there's this support. If you've got cancer, there's that support, and you can ring this line and that line. And I thought, oh yeah, and I thought, oh hang on, that's talking about me. That's me. The whole thing was surreal, and I praise God for it being surreal, because I think that was probably a way I could deal with it and keep and keep fighting through it. It started a fairly intense few years in and out of doctors' surgeries, hospitals, etc. Like I mentioned, Peter Mac over in Melbourne. There were professors and doctors and leading hands in departments and stuff. There was one point there in the Peter Mac, I remember sitting on a stool in the middle of a large room, and I think there was like a dozen or so, wasn't there? People in stools reading through my notes and asking me questions. Because like I said, the fact that the type of cancer I had was malignant was very, very rare, and it attracted some big name doctors and healthcare professionals, and I believe that at that stage there were some prayers already being attended to, just by the level of care that had been escalated to come and attend to me. I'll speed this up because this is heading towards 50 minutes. 2 major surgeries, 2 lots of radiation therapy later. I got pretty low physically at times. I lost a lot of weight. You'll be happy to know I found it again. But I did lose a lot of weight. I lost about nearly 30 kilos, I think, while I was going through my first lot of radiation therapy. I got pretty low physically. I got to a stage where I was dehydrated. I couldn't eat. My mouth was red raw. It got to a stage one morning where I couldn't eat soggy Weet Bix for breakfast, could I, with water on them? And we've said, no, that's not good. And we went into hospital, and it was then that they realised that the amount of radiotherapy they were giving me was probably hurting me a lot more than what we thought it would. But throughout all of this, and again, I believe it was due to prayer from church family and my family as well. I always managed to keep a good mental approach to it. And those that know me, I pretty much joked my way, well, not joked my way through it, it was serious, but I joked my way through it and made light of it. And that was my way of dealing with it. So while my personal relationship with God was not strong at that time, it was better because I was with my wife and we'd be coming back to church. I never ever forgot my upbringing and my faith in the power of prayer. I was very, very aware that my larger family were praying for me. And I was very, very aware that my church family was praying for me. And if I look at 1 John 5:14, it mentions, "This is the confidence which we have before him, that if we ask anything that is according to his will, he hears us." And I think that's a very important verse there. According to his will, he hears us. And importantly, for me, the people that were praying for me and forwarding these prayers, the important part of this was that at that time the Spirit was touching people as an answer to all of these prayers, and they were receptive and responsive. Looking back, Narelle and I can see all the instances where people, both from church and outside the church, were answering these prayers. We got to a stage where, we'd only been married a few weeks, as I said, so we had a brand new mortgage, and we got to weeks where the bank was empty, didn't we? It was empty. And you know what? We'd go down to the letterbox hoping and praying that it wasn't another bill in there. And sometimes there were little envelopes with little wads of cash or cheques or other things in there that helped us along the way, both from people from church family and people outside of church, people you wouldn't expect to be helping us out. But obviously the prayers were going up there, and God was finding, the Spirit was finding people to touch and to help us along the way. And we're eternally thankful for all of those people that helped us. the importance of being attentive to doing God's will in answering these prayers. As I said, a lot of people will pray and hope for a magical type answer to a prayer, and there have been magical type answers to prayers, miracles to prayers, or we'll pray and just hope that it'll happen, it'll get organised. God will organise it, or someone else will organise it. But you know what? We need to facilitate the answer to those prayers where God directs us. We need to be the answer to those prayers. We will pray for someone, and God might touch someone on the shoulder. The Spirit might touch someone on the shoulder, or say something to someone and go, "Oh, you know, this guy needs a visit," or this person might need some food, or needs some money. Listen, it is so important. We are the hands and feet for the answer to a lot of prayers. So that was a major humility lesson for both of us, wasn't it? It was, we were down to rock bottom, health-wise, physically, money-wise. It was a rough start to our life together, wasn't it? But I credit the rough start to our life together as having done nothing more than make us grow strong together and appreciate one another, and appreciate the small things in life. It has been a major humility lesson for me. I'm not a great morning person, but once I get over that, I never take a day for granted. Every day is a gift from God, and it is given to us with a reason or purpose. Don't waste a day. Get up, enjoy the day. Interact with each other, love each other. There are a lot of people, and as we touched on in the prayer there's a lot of people that don't get to wake up the next day. So every day you wake up, it is a gift from God, and treat it as such. Have a good relationship with God, pray with God, study with God, have a good relationship with your family and your kids and your friends, and treat each day as an absolute gift from God. My wife has never beat me up with... Oh, that's important that I keep adding that sentence. My wife has never beat me up. That's true as well. But my wife has never beat me up with getting my faith up to scratch. I can remember a couple of times we had, and it would only have been best described as a prickly sort of feel me out kind of conversation. But my wife knew that bashing, pushing and kicking this stubborn mule here would only backfire and would end in disaster. So, but we constantly attended church. We constantly attended at that time youth regionals, because I was still a little bit younger in those days, and different programs, and went to a lot of small Bible groups. We actually ended up hosting, haven't we, over the time, some small Bible groups, some small groups ourselves. All the time, my walk back in the right direction was always a walk, not a shove, with my wife holding my hand all the way. And that, to me, was super important. We all go at different speeds. Our journeys all take us at different speeds. Our relationships all go at different speeds, and I like to think that our relationships with God also travel at different speeds. We're all at different parts on our relationship with God, and how fast I was getting to a commitment, don't know at that stage. Pivotal moment. You guys didn't think I was ever going to get here, did you? You thought I was going to waffle forever. The pivotal moment. Now, I apologise, Ruben, you're going to be sick of having your baptism quoted yet again. But I'm sorry, mate, that was a pivotal moment for me, as it has been for some others. The testimony that you actually did get to give at your baptism absolutely supercharged my decision to commit. Where you talked about being baptised not because I'm good enough, but rather because I know I'm not. And to me, I'd grown up in the church, again, reflecting back on what I'd said earlier with the kindergarten stories and and probably what was a little bit of a superficial faith, I thought, no, I'm never going to be at that stage where I'm ready to have a relationship with God. So I'm just not getting baptised. In fact, when people used to rib me, or when they found out I wasn't baptised, I used to kick back against that a little bit hard as well. That, and you've got to do a lot of jobs around the church too. People didn't realise that I spent the first 40 years of my church life unbaptised, and they were astounded. I remember Louis being astounded when he found out I wasn't baptised, and disgusted too, I think he was. But it had gotten me out of a lot of church roles. But anyway, that's not a good excuse not to get baptised, Aaron, by the way, either. God's will works in mysterious ways, which a lot of the time are not immediately apparent. Our human nature demands quick fixes and immediate attention. We're talking about this on the way over in the car today about someone. Unfortunately, as humans, we pray, we see a problem when we pray, and we pray for all the right reasons, but our human nature goes, God, why aren't they better? Why aren't they well? Why aren't they now financially better off? Or why haven't we provided them a job? Or that sort of thing. And we go, why hasn't this happened quickly? God's plan will become apparent as time goes on. Like I touched on earlier, we need to be patient, trust and have faith that God is guiding us for the best. That's easy for me to say now I'm 50. It's easy to look back and say, okay, I can see the journey that God has taken me on. And I was looking last night in Proverbs 19:21, which reads, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." Two reflections on this. While I thought my first marriage should have worked, and at that point in time I was obviously upset, and as I spoke about, the devastation and crying all the way to work. If I'd had my way and I'd prayed for that marriage to work, and that marriage did work or something, I would not have been led to Narelle, and we wouldn't have had a family with Ollie. And on the direction I was travelling in that first marriage, I dare say I wouldn't have a relationship with God either. And it wouldn't have kept me close and in touch with the church. So at that point in time, I was Devo, and like I said, you're thinking, God, why am I in this position? Why am I going through this? But it was an intersection in my journey to where I'm at now in my relationship with God. Point 2. One can argue that having cancer is a pretty sucky way to be. That's true. I'm not going to argue with that. Uncertainty, anxiety, pain, financial loss, relationship strains, they all come along for the ride, make no mistake. It's rough, and for me still has plenty of day-to-day challenges. I live with a lot of side effects. I still have to have a lot of doctor's visits. I'm not as nimble as I'd like to be at this stage in my life. Having said that, every morning I wake up, once I get my morning fogs out of the way, I take that day as a blessing. Every day I've managed to wake up and see the day, it's a blessing. I'm just going to add a little bit in here very, very, very quickly. I have a woman that has been doing scans on me for the last 18 years in nuclear medicine. And we've got a very rare relationship where we've known each other for the 18 years. Most of her clientele, if that's not the correct word, is it? Most of her patients, that's much better, yeah. Most of her patients will see her for a year or 2 or 3 and have a few scans. And I'll get the somber bit out of the way first. They'll either pass away or they'll get better and go into remission, and she doesn't see them again. So it's a rare relationship where she and I actually have been having scans for 18 years. And to look back at that point in time where the GP first put the fear in us that it was cancer, and for me to still be up here giving my testimonial today is absolutely amazing, given some outcomes and what some of the worst outcomes could have been. It is fully grounded, Narelle and I. Not a month goes by where we don't discuss, normally in the car it is, I don't know why, but we don't discuss, normally in the car, how lucky we are to have a great relationship with each other, how lucky we are to have Ollie, how lucky we are to have a supporting church family and wider family, and to have a roof. Oh, you made me say it. I have to say it's a fancy roof over our heads. It's a very nice roof. Thanks, wife. Over our heads. And what we need to get by. It's all we need. We have each other. We have a relationship with God. We have a roof. We touched on this out in Sabbath school this morning. And we get by. But how lucky are we to have a loving Father that provides for all our needs? We also discuss helping others where we can. And this is important, as this, like I mentioned earlier, may be the facilitating the answering of prayers, as has been done for us in the past. There were people that got off their butt and helped us through our difficult times, and I swear they were the answer to prayers. Our relationship with God needs to be a two-way, not just praising, thanking and asking, but it needs to be listening and doing. You may just be the answer to prayers that are helping someone on their journey in God's will. I fully believe that God answered prayers earlier on in my life to deliver me to where I am now. Has He kept me alive just long enough to tell my testimony? Ooh, that's a worry, isn't it? Someone keep an eye on me after this, won't you? My wife and son are really hoping there is more of God's purpose for me to come, as they would probably like me to stick around for a bit longer. Yeah? A positive, yeah. We'll talk about this in the car on the way home. I'm going to invite the musos to pop up now and bring an end to this all so we can go home and have some lunch. But while they're coming up, we're going to be singing a song. Some of the words in this song: I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never failed me. I may have gone close to thinking it had, but here I am, as strong and as willing as the next person up here in front of you. Some of the other words: all my days I've been held in your hands. Don't be fooled into thinking God has left your side all because you're in the wars, or those that you love are in the wars. He is still there, and He is wanting to hold your hand all the way through it. I believe God's will for all of us is a very large picture plan. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. I try not to get stuck in any kind of woe is me, praying for an immediate fix to suit my will. And to suit that type of mindset. It is easy to do in a world full of let's have it done now. We're all important in God's master plan, and if it is God's will for us to wake up another day, don't waste that precious day. Make the most of it. Be humble, love your fellow brother and sister, even if they don't sit well with you. They are one of God's children also, on their own difficult journey, often with circumstances we don't know about or understand, just the same as you. And listen for God's whisper or tap on the shoulder to help one of these people and help another one of His children to carry on their journey in their relationship with Him. Let's sing of the goodness of God.